Unveiling the mystery, who was Cain's wife and the overlooked daughters of Adam and Eve? Have you ever wondered about the enigmatic question of how Cain, one of the earliest sons of Adam and Eve, found a wife and fathered children if, according to the Bible, Adam and Eve were the first and only human beings at the time? This mystery, which has puzzled readers and theologians for centuries, holds some fascinating clues in the scriptures and various religious texts that may shed light on this ancient question. To begin, the creation story of Adam and Eve is considered one of the most profound events in human history, marking the dawn of humankind's relationship with the divine. According to Genesis, God fashioned Adam from the dust of the earth, breathing life into him. Adam became a living being, the very first of humanity. Then, seeing Adam's solitude, God created Eve from one of Adam's ribs, establishing the first human relationship and the foundation of humanity's bond with God. Together, they lived in the Garden of Eden, meant to be a place of harmony and fulfillment. However, their choices led to exile, and with this, a new chapter in human existence began outside Eden. In time, Adam and Eve bore two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain, the firstborn, became a farmer, while Abel tended sheep. As the story goes, both sons presented offerings to God. Abel's offering, brought with a genuine heart, found favor with God. However, Cain's offering did not. This difference stirred resentment within Cain, ultimately leading him to take his brother's life in a moment of jealousy and anger. God's punishment for this grave act was to curse Cain, casting him into exile as a wanderer who could no longer yield crops from the earth as he once did. Fearing for his life and suspecting that others might harm him, Cain voiced his concerns to God. In response, God marked Cain with a protective sign, ensuring that anyone who encountered him would be deterred from killing him. Thus, Cain departed to the land of Nod, where, according to Genesis, he encountered a wife and later fathered a son, Enoch. But this account leaves readers with lingering questions. Where did Cain find a wife if Adam and Eve were the only people on earth? And could there have been other humans outside of this family? The answer may lie in a combination of biblical interpretation and historical context. One hypothesis suggests that God may have created additional humans beyond Adam and Eve to allow humanity to grow in number. Although this idea is not directly stated in Genesis, it remains one interpretation for resolving the dilemma of Cain's mysterious wife. Another prominent theory among biblical scholars and historians is that Cain married one of his own sisters, or perhaps a niece, born from Adam and Eve after Cain and Abel. While the Genesis account does not provide exhaustive details about all the children of Adam and Eve, Genesis 5:4 states that Adam had other sons and daughters after the birth of Seth, the son born to Adam and Eve after Abel's death. This statement implies that Adam and Eve had multiple children who in turn had their own families, filling the earth with people over time. This explanation aligns with the cultural and practical context of early human society, where close-kin marriages were not only common, but necessary to populate and expand the family line. For example, later in the Bible, the descendants of Noah's family, who survived the Great Flood, also married among themselves to reestablish human society. Other examples include Abraham, who married Sarah, his half-sister, demonstrating that unions between close relatives were widely accepted in the early biblical tradition. It wasn't until thousands of years later, around 2,500 years after Adam and Eve, that laws forbidding close-kin marriages were introduced to protect genetic health and support social structures that became more complex as societies grew. Additional insight comes from religious texts outside the official Bible canon, such as the Book of Jubilees, also known as the Book of Years. Although not included in the official biblical canon, this book provides a supplementary account of humanity's early family tree, offering possible identities for some of Adam and Eve's other children. According to the Book of Jubilees, Cain married a woman named Awan, identified as one of Adam and Eve's daughters. In this text, Awan is sometimes called Kalima, a name which may represent strength and resilience. She faced considerable trials alongside Cain, dealing with the consequences of his exile and divine curse. This book also mentions another daughter, Azura, who married Seth Adam and Eve's third son, who was born after Abel's death. This union is portrayed as one that would continue a line of faith and devotion. The descendants of Seth and Azurah are noted for their adherence to spiritual and ethical values, in contrast to the challenging and often turbulent journey that marked Cain's lineage. In biblical history, these two lines, Cain's and Seth's, are sometimes viewed as symbols of two aspects of humanity. Cain's descendants, shaped by Cain's troubled legacy, represent the frailties of human nature, struggling with moral missteps. On the other hand, Seth's lineage is associated with moral and spiritual steadfastness. These differences highlight the divergence of human experiences and the consequences of choices, as emphasized in biblical teachings. Despite the Book of Jubilees being an extra-biblical text, it provides an alternative perspective on humanity's first family, contributing to a richer understanding of these early stories. It suggests that Adam and Eve's family was far larger and more complex than the traditional biblical account might initially suggest, and it brings to light the forgotten daughters of Adam and Eve, who played crucial roles in the continuation of humankind. So, who was Cain's wife? While we may never have a definitive answer, the most plausible explanation within the biblical framework is that she was one of his sisters or nieces, an arrangement both necessary and culturally acceptable in the earliest human societies. This interpretation not only reconciles the mystery of Cain's marriage, but also invites us to consider the broader implications of humanity's origins. Whether understood as literal or symbolic, these stories invite readers to reflect on themes of family, morality, faith, and the consequences of human choices in shaping civilization. Thus, the story of Cain's wife and the forgotten daughters of Adam and Eve serves as a reminder of the complexity of human beginnings. These narratives challenge readers to explore the layers within the scriptures, seeking insight not only into our ancient past, but also into the enduring questions about family, morality, and faith that continue to shape the human experience today. Cain and Abel, the mystery of Cain's wife, and the origins of early humanity. The story of Cain and Abel, the two sons of Adam and Eve, is one of the Bible's most mysterious and compelling accounts, raising questions that have intrigued readers for centuries. After their creation and fall, Adam and Eve lived in a world dramatically altered by their choice to eat from the forbidden tree of knowledge. Outside of Eden, they began their family and, in time, welcomed their sons, Cain and Abel. While these two brothers shared a common origin, their fates took very different paths. Cain, the elder son, chose the life of a farmer, working the land to produce food. Abel, meanwhile, became a shepherd, caring for flocks of sheep. In an act of devotion, both brothers presented offerings to God. Abel, with a sincere and devout heart, offered the best of his flock, and God accepted this gift favorably. Cain, however, brought produce from his fields, but God did not look upon his offering with favor. The reasons behind God's different reactions have been debated, with many suggesting that Abel's offering reflected a deeper devotion and sincerity, while Cain's lacked this level of heartfelt commitment. This perceived rejection deeply hurt Cain, igniting feelings of jealousy and resentment toward his brother. In a moment of uncontrolled anger, Cain attacked and killed Abel, committing the Bible's first recorded murder. God confronted Cain, and as punishment for his actions, placed a curse upon him. No longer would the earth yield crops for Cain as it had before. Furthermore, he was condemned to live as a wanderer, cast away from his family's presence and from the land he once knew. Afraid for his life as a marked man, Cain expressed fear that others would seek to harm him. In response, God set a protective mark upon him, a sign to deter anyone who might wish to take vengeance. This action both punished and protected Cain, who would now face life as an outcast in a world that seemed to hold other people besides his immediate family. So, Cain left, journeying east to a region called Nod. It is here that the mystery begins to deepen. Cain found a wife in Nod, married her, and eventually had a son named Enoch. This account, however, prompts a compelling question. If Adam and Eve were the only human beings God created, where did Cain's wife come from? There are several interpretations and theories that try to resolve this mystery, which range from historical to theological and symbolic. One common interpretation is that Cain married one of his sisters, a daughter of Adam and Eve, or perhaps even a niece. According to Genesis 5, After the birth of Seth, Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters. This suggests that Cain, Abel, and Seth were not the only children of Adam and Eve. They had many others who, over time, would have formed their own family groups, spreading across the land. At that early stage of humanity, close kin marriages, such as between siblings or cousins, would have been necessary to establish a growing population. Without any other human beings, the family of Adam and Eve had no choice but to intermarry. Though this practice may seem strange or even taboo by modern standards, it was culturally and practically essential for the expansion of humanity. In fact, we see other examples of close kin marriages throughout the Bible. For example, Abraham, a central figure in the Bible and considered the patriarch of faith, married Sarah, who was his half-sister, Genesis 20:12. These marriages were not only accepted, but sometimes necessary to continue family lines and fulfill divine purposes. Some scholars propose a different theory, suggesting that God may have created additional people beyond Adam and Eve, who lived in other regions and gradually populated the world. This idea, known as multiple creations, suggests that Cain may have encountered one of these individuals when he arrived in Nod. However, this theory is not explicitly supported by the Genesis account, where Adam and Eve are traditionally viewed as the sole progenitors of the human race. Still, it remains an interesting theory for those seeking alternative answers to Cain's marital situation. Another insightful source comes from apocryphal texts, such as the Book of Jubilees, also known as the Book of Years. Though this text is not included in the standard biblical canon, it offers an expanded account of humanity's earliest days. In the Book of Jubilees, Cain's wife is identified as Awan, one of Adam and Eve's daughters. Awan, also referred to as Kalima, is described as a figure of strength and resilience who joined Cain in his exile and faced life's challenges alongside him. This name and her symbolic role provide additional dimensions to Cain's story, underscoring the trials and consequences faced by those closest to him. In the Book of Jubilees, Cain and Awan's marriage stands in contrast to that of Seth and his wife, Azurah, another daughter of Adam and Eve. Seth, the third son born to Adam and Eve after Abel's death, is described as carrying on a lineage of faith and moral principles. His descendants are often seen as the faithful line, devoted to God and carrying forward ethical values, in contrast to Cain's troubled line. These two lines, one associated with Cain's struggles and the other with Seth's devotion, are symbolic of humanity's complex nature, with its tendencies toward both weakness and virtue. Beyond the individual details of Cain and his wife, these early stories in the Bible reflect the overarching themes of family, faith, and the ethical dilemmas faced by humankind. The marital unions among Adam and Eve's children served a critical role in the early stages of human society. It wasn't until about 2,500 years later that laws prohibiting close-kin marriages were introduced to ensure genetic health and maintain a more organized social structure. By that time, human society had grown significantly in complexity, and prohibitions on incestuous marriages served a practical and ethical function. In essence, the story of Cain's wife, often overlooked or questioned, reflects the extraordinary beginnings of human society. The need for intermarriage among close relatives and the establishment of two contrasting family lines reveal insights into the early human condition as portrayed in biblical narratives. Through the union of Cain and Awan, as well as Seth and Azurah, humanity's first family begins a journey marked by moral choices, spiritual challenges, and the pursuit of relationships that define human civilization's foundations. Ultimately, the mystery surrounding Cain's wife serves as an invitation to readers to look deeper into the scriptures and explore the many questions they raise about human origins. Whether viewed as literal history or a symbolic account, these stories reflect the importance of family, morality, and faith, concepts that continue to resonate deeply in the human experience today. Exploring Cain's marriage in the early generations of humanity. Insights from biblical and extra-biblical texts. The biblical story of Cain is one that delves into the foundational aspects of humanity: love, rivalry, faith, and fallibility. Cain, the firstborn of Adam and Eve, is a figure marked by passion and violence, as well as the challenges of carving out a life after exile. His story not only raises moral and spiritual questions, but also presents a mystery that has intrigued generations. who was Cain's wife, and where did she come from? According to the Genesis account, Cain's family lineage begins with his journey to the land of Nod, where he meets his wife and fathers a son, Enoch. However, Genesis does not explain where this wife came from, which has led scholars and readers to ponder the possibilities. Given that Adam and Eve are presented as the first humans created by God, many assume that Cain's wife would have been one of his own sisters, or perhaps a niece born to one of Adam and Eve's other children. This might seem unusual by today's standards, but such a union was essential in humanity's early days to ensure the population grew. In the earliest stages of human society, kinship marriages were necessary and culturally acceptable. It wasn't until approximately 2,500 years after Adam and Eve that biblical laws emerged, prohibiting close kin marriages to protect the genetic health of future generations and support the structure of an increasingly complex society. As civilization developed, prohibiting incestuous relationships became a practical and ethical mandate. But for Cain's time, marriage to a close relative was entirely feasible and even essential to the survival of the species. Beyond the Bible, additional insights come from other ancient religious texts, one of which is the Book of Jubilees, sometimes referred to as the Book of the Divisions of the Times, or the Book of Celebrations. This text, while not part of the traditional biblical canon, offers a detailed look into the family tree of Adam and Eve, including the early generations of humanity that shaped its destiny. According to the Book of Jubilees, Cain's wife was Awan, a daughter of Adam and Eve. This figure, also called Kelima in some texts, symbolizes strength and resilience. Having shared in Cain's life after his banishment, Awan, or Kelima, is depicted as more than a mere companion to Cain. She is a figure of fortitude who accompanied him on his arduous journey. Together, they faced life's challenges outside the familiar surroundings of Cain's youth, bearing the consequences of Cain's actions as well as the hardships of survival in a world marked by divine judgment. This portrayal of Cain and Awan's relationship reflects the complex roles that women played in these early narratives, often as symbols of strength and endurance. Furthermore, the Book of Jubilees gives additional context to Adam and Eve's other children, introducing us to figures like Azura, another daughter who married Seth, Cain's younger brother. Seth was born to Adam and Eve after the tragic loss of Abel, and his line is portrayed as a moral and spiritual lineage set apart from Cain's turbulent path. Seth and Azura's marriage is described as one that continued the virtues and faith of Adam and Eve, serving as a foundation for generations devoted to God and moral principles. The contrast between the lineages of Cain and Seth presents a symbolic look at two paths that humanity could follow, one marked by moral struggles and errors, and the other striving for virtue and faith. Cain's descendants, sometimes portrayed as living with the consequences of his choices, reflect the human capacity for weakness and error. Seth's lineage, however, embodies the pursuit of righteousness and spiritual devotion. These two branches of Adam and Eve's family illustrate a recurring theme in biblical literature: the complex and sometimes opposing elements within human nature. The marriages between these early family members, Cain with Awan and Seth with Azura, were essential in forming the first generations of humanity. Such unions, while uncommon today, were integral to the Bible's narrative of humanity's beginnings. In the years that followed, the descendants of Seth would carry forward the ideals of faith and righteousness. Meanwhile, Cain's descendants are often associated with innovations and advancements, but also with the moral complexities and challenges faced by humanity. The Book of Jubilees is considered an extra-biblical text, meaning it is not part of the traditional biblical canon. Nevertheless, it has been a valuable resource for those seeking to understand the nuanced details of early biblical history and the lives of humanity's first family. While the Book of Jubilees is not regarded as divinely inspired scripture, it offers historical and cultural insights that complement the biblical story. Its accounts provide readers with an alternative view of humanity's early figures, helping to expand our understanding of their lives and the dynamics within the first family of humankind. Cain and Seth's stories illustrate the dual nature of human potential. Cain's journey represents the struggles and ethical dilemmas that people can face when they turn away from divine guidance. His exile marked by hardships and moral ambiguity, offers a cautionary tale about the consequences of one's choices. Seth's life, however, highlights humanity's pursuit of faith and moral integrity, symbolizing the ideals that humankind can strive for. These two paths not only reflect the individual lives of Cain and Seth, but also mirror the broader human experience, with its capacity for both fallibility and spiritual growth. The early generations of humanity faced extraordinary circumstances as they sought to establish families and navigate relationships. The Genesis account, supplemented by texts like the Book of Jubilees, reveals the challenges and triumphs of these early individuals, presenting their lives in ways that continue to resonate with readers. The struggles and choices made by Cain, Seth, and their descendants set the foundation for the complex web of relationships that would characterize human society. Ultimately, the story of Cain's wife, Awan, and the early daughters of Adam and Eve illuminates the complexity of humanity's beginnings. These figures, while sometimes overlooked, played pivotal roles in shaping the family lineage that would eventually lead to a broader human society. By exploring these narratives, readers gain insight into the lives and legacies of humanity's first family, the dilemmas they faced, and the enduring questions about morality, kinship, and faith. In the end, the mystery surrounding Cain's wife and the marriages within Adam and Eve's family are not only matters of historical curiosity, but also opportunities to reflect on the foundational themes of human existence. They underscore the importance of family, the role of moral choices, and the resilience required to face life's challenges. Whether viewed through a literal or symbolic lens, these stories provide timeless insights into the human condition, inviting readers to ponder the legacy of humanity's earliest days and the values that continue to shape our lives today.